The year 1857 holds a significant place in Indian history. It witnessed the first revolt against the mighty British Empire in India. What started as the Sepoy Mutiny soon spread out like wildfire, mainly across northern and central India. However, this sporadic revolt failed due to the lack of coordination and planning of the revolutionaries. Nevertheless, technically, the revolt of 1857 remains the first war of Indian independence. This realization of national identity was a lengthy process. It also involved common people, leaders, and revolutionaries to bring about change. Let's study how the consciousness of one nation emerged in India. In India, the rise of nationalism was intricately linked with the opposition of colonialism, similar to the way it happened in Vietnam. People realized that they were experiencing a common suffering under the oppressive British colonial rule. This understanding brought the different groups together in their anti-colonial struggle. However, each group developed its own method of struggle against the British rule. The event which proved instrumental in the history of the Indian freedom struggle was the First World War. India had been forced to take part in the First World War, in which Britain had fought against Germany. To continue the war, the British had to increase their defense expenditure and so levied new taxes on Indians to amass money. They introduced income tax and increased the custom duties. The rise in taxes had an adverse effect on the common people, who were forced to live a life of extreme hardship. Another factor which infuriated common people was the forced recruitment of rural people into the army to fight in the First World War. The situation worsened during 1918 when India was hit by crop failure and shortage of food grains. To make matters worse, the crop failure was further followed by famines and outbreak of influenza. This harsh social and political situation set the stage for the beginning of the nationalist struggle in India. The Indian freedom movement gained momentum with the coming of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, later known as Mahatma Gandhi. He emerged on the national scene in January 1915. He had successfully tested novel ideas of non-violence and anti-colonial struggle in South Africa. Mahatma Gandhi brought the directionless revolutionaries of India on a common platform. He motivated diverse social groups to rise above petty differences of caste, creed, religion, region, and work single-mindedly towards the common goal of freedom. Almost all Indians felt that the British were controlling their lives and resources. They now wanted independence from the British. This intensified in the 1870s and 1880s with new laws imposed by the British. The Arms Act of 1878 was passed that stopped Indians from owning arms. This was followed by the Vernacular Press Act, which allowed the British to confiscate the assets of any newspaper that wrote against them.
The final straw came when the British opposed the Ilbert Bill, which allowed Europeans to be tried by an Indian court.
This racial discrimination by the British left the Indians enraged and led to the setting up of organizations like the Indian National Congress, the Indian Association, the Bombay Presidency Association, and the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha. These associations wanted India to be sovereign. This meant enabling Indians to operate without interference from the British. The Indian National Congress was formed in December 1885, when 72 delegates from all over India met at Bombay. Dada Bhai Naroji, an Indian businessman settled in London, and A.O. Hume, a retired British official, guided the younger nationalists of the Congress. The Congress, in its initial years, adopted a moderate outlook in its demands. It demanded more Indians in high positions in the government, the abolishment of the Arms Act, the separation of the executive from the judiciary, and the freedom of speech and expression for the Indians. At the same time, the Congress passed resolutions on issues like forest laws, the salt tax, and the welfare of Indian labourers working abroad. Speeches were given against the British, and newspapers were published criticizing them for India's economic downfall. The Congress felt that it was important for the British to understand the feelings of the Indians. However, by the 1890s, the moderate rationale of the Congress was questioned by many radically thinking Indians like Lala Lajpat Rai, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and Bipin Chandra Pal. These leaders believed in self-reliance rather than waiting for the British government to understand the needs of the Indians. Tilak also raised the famous slogan, "Freedom is my birthright, and I shall have it." In 1905, the British partitioned Bengal, citing administrative convenience, while their actual motive was to create a rift among the Bengalis and also to restrict the influence of the Bengali politicians. This act enraged Indians, and both the moderates and the radicals from the Congress organized movements and meetings against this in different parts of India. This struggle, known as the Swadeshi Movement, was fought against the British rule. It advocated national education, self-help, Swadeshi enterprise, and the use of Indian languages. However, the partition of Bengal was supported by the All India Muslim League. In the meantime, the Congress split in 1907 and was now led by the moderates, while the radical group led by Tilak worked separately. However, in 1915, both the groups united again. They signed the historic Lucknow Pact in 1916 with the All India Muslim League to work together for their cause. Therefore, the latter half of the 19th century saw the emergence of many national organizations in India that fought against the British. Non-violence comes to us through doing good continually without the slightest expectation of return. Such were Mahatma Gandhi's thoughts on fighting injustice. Gandhiji followed non-violence in all his actions and practices, and this made him very dear to the people of India. The ideals of Gandhiji were adopted by many during the protests and satyagrahas all over India during the freedom struggle. Let's take a look at some initiatives taken by people across the country. In Kheda district of Gujarat, poor farmers and peasants protested through non-violent demonstrations against the high taxes imposed by the British. They believed that Gandhiji would help them get their taxes reduced. In the interiors of Tamil Nadu and in coastal Andhra Pradesh, protests were held outside liquor shops, preventing people from entering it. Such protests are referred to as picketing. While in Guntur district of Andhra Pradesh, forest satyagrahas were held against the unjust forest laws of the British. They also let their cattle graze in the forests without paying the British. In this case too, poor peasants and tribals believed that Gandhiji would get the forest regulations abolished. In many forest villages, people declared Swaraj and believed that Gandhi Raj would soon prevail. Meanwhile, in Sindh and Bengal, the Khilafat non-cooperation movement found the support of many peasants and traders.
In Punjab, the Sikhs started a movement to remove corrupt priests in Gurdwaras who were supported by the British.
Whereas in Assam, tea plantation workers boycotted the plantations and declared that it was the wish of Gandhiji to do so. They also shouted slogans of Gandhi Maharaj Ki Jai, demanding an increase in their salary. The references to Krishna in some religious Assamese songs of the time were changed to Gandhi Raja. The peasants of Pratapgarh in Uttar Pradesh were not far behind. They stopped the practice of unlawfully removing tenants from the land they rented and credited Gandhiji for their own efforts. Such was the people's faith in Mahatma Gandhi. However, there were also instances where people interpreted Gandhian ideals in their own manner and protested violently against the British rule. Gandhiji was considered a messiah who would help Indians sort all their problems. His principles of non-violence inspired Indians from all walks of life to fight against the British.